Thank you, Joe. Hello, my name is Ismo Aro, and welcome to RoboCon 2021. Let's talk about the foundation. So, this is the foundation in a nutshell. So, we are a non-profit consortium that fosters the growth of the robot framework. We ensure the development of the framework now and in the future. And when we are talking about the development, at the moment we are funding the core 2 development, but hopefully in the future we also would fund different kind of ecosystem project. One thing what we are also doing is nurturing the community. And actually these RoboCon events are a great example how we are doing it. Alright, so let's talk about year 2020. So as you know, as everybody know, last year was really different and weird, and also known as a year of the Black Swan. And let's see how it was in the foundation point of view. So member end of the 2020. So member companies at the end of the 2020 was 46 companies. Member growth was 11 companies. And this is almost one company per month. It is actually pretty great achievement there. And it shows that companies are really supporting open source development even these hard times. Okay, so where we spend our money, and so we have 2 batch releases in the core tool and 1 minor release, what we have been funding. And okay, this second thing, the merger release, I don't know yet, because as you know, this is pre-recorded and this hasn't happened yet. So in the future, and hopefully when this is broadcast, this is true, 1 major release is 4.0. So no rush there, Pekka. Other things what has happened is the browser library development initiated in the association forums and events like RoboCon 2020 and Worldwide Workshop Wednesday 2020. And thanks to the Mikko Korpela and Rene Rohner about that one. Alright, so let's check the numbers next. And as you can see, member companies, 46 member companies, and this is the growth from when we started from 2015. So pretty linear growth as the revenue is. And as you can see, the revenue has been really good growth and linear growth. And so in that sense, the future looks bright. We are not yet standing on our 2 feet. So we are still depending on the other companies or individual donations. And usually this donation is work that people are willing and companies are paying people to work for us. But our aim is to be self-sufficient in some point of time, because that also gives a good amount of independence there. But like I said, we are more vital than ever. And about RoboCon participants, so as you can see, last year 350, and this year, like I said, this is pre-recorded, so I don't have any clue yet at it. I have that much clue that it's over 350. But we are going to have a Q&A session after this talk, so come and meet us, and I will tell the exact number of 2021. See you there. Okay, so how to contribute the foundation? Of course, if your company is using robot framework, most convenient, easiest way is join the foundation. There's a link over there. And participate in the RoboCons. There's 3 different ways to be a guest. And also one great way to do just submit the talk and also being a sponsor. And then last is that you can buy some merchandise. So we have a web shop. And this is something that we are going to have a robot framework pub in the conference area. Find us there. There are going to be links to the robot framework web shop and also information how to join the foundation. I will be there, and all the breaks there, at least somebody from the foundation board is going to be there. Board mentioned. So here's the board. So I'm the chairman, and then Katri Ordning is our secretary. Rene Rohner is a vice chair, and Jani Haapala, Antti Karjalainen, Mikko Korpela, and Hanna Saari are the board members. And our treasurer is Miikka Salonen. All right, our RoboCon Workgroup 2021, our captain was Hanna Saari, and she made excellent work there. She has been navigating us through the unknown waters, because this is first time we are online, and there's huge amount of things that we didn't know when we started this journey. And as you can see, it has been brewed really nicely, so we are going to have an excellent time next 3 days. And our master celebration is going to be Joy Colantonia, and then we have also crew, which has made this conference happen. Last but not least, I want to give some extra credits to Rene Rohner. He has been walking the extra mile for all of us. He is the one who introduced the Get down to us, and he has been burning so much midnight oil, I know. And of course, his employer has donated his and another work from his company, but I know Rene has also consumed his own time there. So huge thank for you, Rene. All right, without further ado, Pekka Klärck is going to talk about Robot Framework 4.0. So, please, Pekka.
Thanks Ismo for giving an update on Robot Framework Foundation. It's great to hear that although we're living these challenging COVID times, things have been going on so well with the foundation. My name is Pekka Klärck and I'm here to talk about Robot Framework 4.0 that was released just a few days before this conference. It's a really big new release with a lot of interesting cool new features, and I'm going to talk about the most important ones here in this presentation. There are two especially big new features that I'm going to start with, and the one I'm going to talk first is skip. So, starting from this release, Robot Framework Test and Tasks can finally have a skip status in addition to the pass and fail statuses that have been supported from the very beginning. There are various ways tests and tasks can get this skip status, illustrated by these example test cases here on this slide. The first test case has been skipped using the skip command line option that matches test cases based on tags. Basically, a test case having a tag that is used with this skip option will be skipped without running any of those keywords. It works the same way as the old exclude option, but there's of course one big difference, that these skipped test cases, they will be shown in logs and reports, whereas excluded test cases, they will be dropped altogether and they aren't shown anywhere. The second test case here then has been skipped using a new built-in keyword skip. Since it's a keyword, it can be used in a test case or task directly on the test and task level, or in any keyword they are using to skip this kind of test or task dynamically during execution. There's also a variation of this keyword called skip if that takes a condition and then skips this test or tasks if the condition is true. Both skip and skip if use internally a new special exception called skip execution that is also exposed via Robot Framework programmatic APIs to test libraries so that they can use this exception in their keywords to skip test or tasks if needed. If these keywords or any keyword using this aforementioned exception is used in suite setup, test cases in that suite are skipped without running them for real. If these keywords or exceptions would be used in suite teardown, those executed tests or tasks, they would be marked skipped after execution. The last test case here is then using skip on failure functionality. It's also initiated from the command line using option skip on failure, and it's also based on tags. Test cases having matching tags are, if they pass, handled like normal passing test cases, but if they happen to fail, they will get skip status automatically instead of fail. The motivation behind this functionality is that it allows having test cases or tasks that are not ready yet, or test cases testing functionality that is not ready yet in an automation run. Meaning that they basically, such test cases, they won't break the build. Instead of being a failure, there's a skip. This works pretty much the same way as the old criticality function worked with earlier robot framework versions. With the criticality functionality allowed specifying test cases also based on tags that are considered non-critical, and non-critical failed test cases were basically ignored, so it's kind of same end result. This criticality was pretty similar to the new skip status, obviously not exactly the same, but so similar that it was removed when the skip functionality was added. So now things are pretty simple and straightforward. They are just passed, failed, and skipped tests or tasks. The second really big new enhancement in this release is the native if-else syntax. Robot Framework has had built-in keyword run keyword if for a long time, and it has been there so that you can execute keywords conditionally, but it's kind of cumbersome, and now this native if-else structure makes test data simpler. We have here in this example two if structures. First, there inside that for loop, there's an if with a condition so that if this length is greater than the maximum, these two keywords log and evaluate, they will be run. And if the condition is not true, well, nothing is done. Then the second if else structure at the end has a condition as well, but then there's that else branch. And if the condition is true, then the if branch is executed, meaning that log keyword, and if it's not true, then that else is executed, and basically that keyword will then fail because it's using the fail keyword there inside. Robot Framework if-else structure also supports else-if branches like basically any other programming language there is. Another really important feature illustrated by this example is that we can nest these control structures. So for loops have been in Robot Framework syntax for some time. As you probably know, the syntax has been changing, but they've been there for long. But it wasn't possible to nest them. You could basically do that so that you could have a for loop, and then in a for loop you had a keyword, and the keyword had another loop, but directly nesting for loop wasn't supported. But now it is. So you can have for loop inside a for loop, if inside for, like in this example, if inside if, for inside if, and so on. You can mix and match them however you want. A problem with using this kind of programmatic features here on Robot Framework data level, where the idea anyway is that things should be relatively simple, easy to understand, is that they make the data pretty complicated. There may also be some performance problems with big for loops and so on. If this is a problem, then moving this kind of logic into a library is often a good idea. And if you are interested in that, come see my other RoboCon presentation where I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about why and how to write libraries, and I'm going to use this exact same example there. I'm going to convert this keyword to Python, and then we can see what kind of benefits these two different approaches have. So although moving complex logic into libraries is often a good idea, there still are really valid good use cases for this new if-else structure, and it definitely is better than the old run keyword if. So we got skip status, but we also got NotRun status. NotRun status is not something test or task or suites can get. It's only for keywords, ifs, and fors. And there are two ways something can get this NotRun status, both shown by these examples here. The first example is showing that if we have a failure in a keyword used in a test or task, then the remaining keywords in that keyword or on the test or task top level, they won't really be run, but they will be shown starting from this release in the log file, having that kind of gray color and not run status. Of course, they weren't run earlier either, but earlier they weren't shown in the log file, so they were just test execution stopped right away. Now these keywords are gone through. That doesn't really add any kind of performance penalty or anything like that. To make it easier to see what the test or task would have done if there hadn't been a failure. This can help understanding what was going on there and so on. This is especially important if you don't have easy access to the original script. The second way something can get this NotRun status is that if we have an if-else structure and obviously only one of those branches is actually run, and then the remaining, they got NotRun status. Oh, well, of course, it's possible that none of those branches are run even. But yeah, so we have here an example. There's an if with the condition, RoboCon is awesome, which, because this condition is evaluated in Python, that is a non-empty string, it's considered true. And of course, that statement, RoboCon is awesome, is true in general. So it's true, so that's why this keyword log inside the if branch has been executed. And the else branch is not. Plenty of nice features there. And also Robot Framework library API has been enhanced a bit. There has been some nice features in the argument conversion. Argument conversion itself is a pretty old feature. It's been available since Robot Framework 3.1. It works based on type information that you can give to keywords either using Python tree style type hints or by giving these type hints, type information into a keyword decorator. Here we have a keyword called move, and it's using type hints. It also uses keyword decorator though, but this time types are not given to that decorator. So it's using type hints. It has two arguments, distance and direction, and both of them have a type hint. The first type hint is union, and union means basically that there are multiple possible types for this argument, and in this case, in this example, the possible values are integer and float. With earlier Robot Framework versions, this kind of a union type, it would have been ignored. It wouldn't have been an error or anything like this, but basically the framework would have just ignored such a type hint because it didn't understand it. Now it does understand it, and so it means is that okay, this value can either be an integer or float, so both kind of values are accepted. And that works then so that here on these example test cases on lower right corner, we are using that move keyword twice, first with value 100 and then with value 1.5, and they both work. First one is converted to an integer and the latter one is converted to a float. Notice that if there wasn't any kind of type information here, both values 100 and 1.5 would be passed in this keyword as a string, because although they look like numbers, Robot Framework doesn't do any automatic conversion just based on that. There always need to be this type information available one way or the other. The second argument here, then this direction, its value is an enumeration called direction. Enumerations are really cool in cases where your keyword accepts kind of a certain values. Like in this case, the direction can be either left or right. So enumeration basically are kind of an object that can have limited set of values. In this case, just those two. We are using this keyword there once so that we pass value left there. It's a string again, but since the argument is an enumeration that has a left as a member, then that left string is converted to enumeration with the left value. In the second case there, this direction is not given at all, and because that argument has a default value, that's fine, and the value ends up being none. Enumeration conversion has been there since automatic argument conversion was introduced, but there have been some small changes. And in Robot Framework 4.0, the major change related to this was how none is handled when it's a default value. So not that big changes in the library API itself, but then bigger changes when enumerations are used with libdock. So libdock is a tool to generate library documentation out of Robot Framework test library source code, and it has been enhanced quite a bit in this release. I would assume most of you have read Robot Framework library documentations, and you can see that it looks quite different than it used to. Much better styles, and this especially works much better on mobile. A really nice feature here is that we can have a list of keywords here all the time available. Here we only have one keyword, so it's quite short list. And this is, by the way, the exact same keyword from the earlier slide. There's also the search function there straight available, so not hidden like it was earlier. Plenty of other enhancements as well. One nice thing is that arguments are now shown so that we can see argument name, possible default value, and argument types separately, when earlier they were together as a kind of a single, hard to understand string. So much easier to read. Related to these arguments, what's really handy is that we have this data type section that is generated if you are using enumerations or possibly type digits as arguments. So we use that direction enumeration in an argument, and that's why this data type section has been generated automatically, listing that enumeration there. It's very handy, shows allowed values, shows the documentation, and also has cross-reference links back to keywords using this particle enumeration. Really handy. If you are interested to see this enhancement live in real usage, go check out the amazing browser library. It's using enumerations and also type digs extensively, so its documentation is a great example to see how this stuff works. This great browser library developers also proposed most of these Leaprock enhancements and actually implemented most of them as well. In addition to these visual changes here on libdock HTML output, libdock machine-readable spec files have been enhanced as well. The most important enhancement there related to the old XML spec file is that this argument information is now stored separately there as well, so that the tools processing these spec files can see argument names and default values and types separately, not as a string that they needed to somehow try to parse. Another change is that libdock spec files can now also be generated in JSON, which of course helps if you are using them in web domain. Plenty of nice visible changes in logs, reports, in Leaprock outputs and elsewhere, but also plenty of changes in this release that are kind of more hidden, not directly visible, at least for a human eye. Plenty of changes in different APIs. The most important one of these API changes is that Listener version 2 now gets keyword source information. So listeners can have start keyword and end keyword methods that are called whenever keywords are called and started and ended. And now among this information passed to these methods, there is the path to a file where the keyword is used and also the line number where it's used. This helps especially with debuggers, and I hope and kind of expect that in next RoboCon we are going to have some talk showing how cool new debuggers we have in the ecosystem. Parsing APIs have also been enhanced. As many of you know, Robot Framework 3.2 contained a totally rewritten parser and rewritten parsing APIs. Those existing APIs haven't now been enhanced too much. I mean, the ones that were introduced in 3.2, but so old code using the parsing API should still work just fine. What has been enhanced is the code related to modifying the model, the parsing model that you can get from the parsing APIs. So now it's much easier to parse some robot data, make modifications to it, and save it back to the file system. And this is something that tool called Tidy that used to be and still is built into Robot Framework, but there's also a new external Tidy project available that has already now much better, much more features than the built-in one. That tool is using these parsing APIs, modifying data and so on. If you are interested in this, there's a presentation explaining this Tidy tool and a related linter tool that's also using these parsing APIs, and same people are then having another presentation explaining these parsing APIs, how they can be used in more details. So if you're interested in that, you know what presentations to view. Also, robots running and result model have been enhanced. So parsing model that robot framework has maps data directly to how it looks like in a file system. But then this running model that is generated based on the parsing model doesn't anymore map directly to the file system. Instead, these are objects that can actually be executed by the framework, and then result model is generated based on results during execution, and that is saved to output XML file. These models were changed because earlier it was so that tests or tasks they were only using keywords inside. Even though we had for loops, basically they were just masked to be keywords on running side, and on result side anything was just a keyword. That didn't work anymore so well when we added if structures, so a decision was made to add concrete kind of for and if object into the model and make related changes. These changes are, to some extent, unfortunately backwards incompatible. Again, if you have tools that are inspecting executed tests or inspecting results, the changes that are needed are relatively small. But if you have tools that are, for example, modifying test cases before execution, for example, using the pre-run modifier API, or if you are modifying results somehow, it's most likely that you need to do some changes to those tools. Robot Framework 4.0 release notes explain these changes pretty thoroughly, so go check them out and see how what kind of possible changes you need to do. Of course, testing things out is the easiest way then to see how they really work. Yet another nice enhancement to relate to APIs is that this remote library API that allows having libraries on remote machines or maybe on a local machine but using some other language than Python. That has been enhanced so that it's possible to get information about the whole library, about all the keywords and the arguments and so on in one remote library call. When earlier the API always required getting the information so that there was some multiple calls per keyword. And you can imagine that if you have like hundreds or thousands keywords in some kind of huge library, then that can take a long time to get all this information, especially if the library is on a remote machine and the network is somewhat slow. This enhancement to the API, of course, doesn't really help until both sides of the connection support it, so remote servers then still need to be updated, but at least with the Python remote server, that's kind of already, there are plans to add that enhancement there. Many other changes, of course, more than on this slide, but I'm not going to go through them all, but some few additions here. One nice enhancement is that list and dictionary variable expansion has been enhanced so that it works also now that if you have a nested list or nested dictionary and want to get one item from the top level thing and top level list or dictionary and then expand that. So basically this syntax that is used in that example means that we are finding variable named var. Then we are taking its second item. That's what that one means. It's index 1, meaning second item. And then we are expanding that using that at sign there means that we are expanding it. How it works in practice and how it is better than what was reported earlier is also explained in the release notes. One thing I want to mention here is that this exact same syntax used to earlier means something different. Earlier, when lists and dictionaries and so on before they were unified, how these different kind of variables work, this syntax was used for accessing an item from a list directly. So not kind of list expansion, but just accessing a variable value from a list. So that syntax had been already deprecated. So with earlier versions, you will get the deprecation warning saying that this will change, but now the syntax has been changing. So this is something to take into account when migrating, especially if you're migrating from some older versions, like from 3.0 or even some Robot Framework 2 versions to 4. Probably good idea to go through the versions there between and see what kind of deprecation messages you, for example, get. Then a nice enhancement that doesn't have any kind of a backwards incompatible aspects or anything like this is that the relative order of messages and keywords in the log file is now preserved. Typically, keywords that you run only have either other keywords inside them, like Robot Framework user keywords, or they only have messages, like library keywords. But there are cases like, for example, when using the trace log level, when a keyword can have both. Earlier, this was logged so that the keywords were in the log file first and then messages then, even though some of these messages possibly were logged before these keywords. But now that's fixed and they are in the correct order. Smallest but nice enhancement is that Python 3.a positional only arguments are supported properly. And since we're talking about Python versions here, very important to notice that this will be the last major release to support Python 2. The main reason, and probably actually the only reason we are still supporting Python 2 in the first place, is that we have a sizable community using Jython, Java implementation of Python, that unfortunately doesn't have Python 3 compatible version available. And so we wanted to keep supporting Jython also with this major release. Unfortunately for us, keeping that support is not possible anymore going forward, so Robot Framework 5.0 won't support Python 2 anymore. If you're a Python 2 user, I mean not Jython user, but Python 2 user, it's definitely time to upgrade. And if you're a Jython user, then there's a presentation by Juho here in this conference, so explaining different ways how to move forward from Jython when it seems that this Jython 3 is very, very unlikely to happen in foreseeable future. So this has been an awesome, really, really big release. A lot of great features. And it wouldn't have been possible with only me there as a main developer. We had a bigger team this time. But first of all, my work here has been sponsored by the Robot Framework Foundation. And big thanks for the foundation for the support, and of course big thanks for the close to 50 member organization as well. Big thanks also to all the conference sponsors and you conference participants, because the profits from this conference will also be spent for future Robot Framework development. But Robot Framework Foundation support alone wasn't enough to make this bigger team. We had some extra funding as well. We had Mikko and Janne working for this release. Both Mikko and Janne have been working for the old Robot Framework core team, working for Nokia networks when framework was developed there and when the Robot Framework Foundation didn't exist. So they know the framework and the ecosystem around it very well. So they work for Reactor, a consulting company, but in this project, their work has been sponsored by RoboCorp. Then we also had Rene working here. Rene was already mentioned by Ismo earlier. Rene has been super active lately. And Rene's work here has been sponsored by his employer, Imbus. All these companies, Imbus, RoboCorp and Reactor, they are also actually RoboCon sponsors. So big thanks for them for their support as well. Then we also got contributions by the wider open source community. Plenty of pull requests has been merged, plenty of other kind of enhancement proposed. People have been actively testing preview releases and so on. So, well, thanks everyone who have been contributing one way or the other. What will happen next then? What kind of releases can we expect? Well, I obviously hope that Robot Framework 4.0 would be totally bug-free and no bug-fix releases would be needed, but I'm realistic. That has never happened with Robot Framework, and I doubt that happens with any project, basically. So I expect that we need 4.01 release at least at some point, possibly 4.02 as well. How soon? I don't know. Hopefully not immediately, but we'll see. Then if there are needs for not huge features, but anyway, kind of not trivial features, I don't want to have them in these minor releases, in bug-fix releases. I instead rather create 4.1 release that contains actual features. But we'll see. That release may never actually occur. It might be that we instead go straight to Robot Framework 5.0, but this will depend on how much money the foundation has. Do we get some extra sponsoring again, and so on. Because it doesn't make sense to start with this 5.0 release if it seems that we cannot finish it in time. So in that case, 4.1 might be a better idea. We'll see. Also, the timeline for 5.0 is totally open. It might be next year if we have a lot of extra sponsoring. Foundation has money, then maybe already this year. So yeah, it's hard to tell exactly what releases are coming on when we just made this release out. And also, let's celebrate that and let's then start thinking about these future releases. But yeah, next on this presentation, what is going to happen is that we are going to hear what Ed has to say about our awesome community and what the community has been doing during the last year and how the ecosystem built by this awesome community has been growing. So yeah, thanks for listening. Hope you have good questions for the Q&A, and let's hear what Ed has to say.
Kiitos, Pekka. As Pekka mentioned, my name is Ed Manlove, and I'm here to talk to you about the Robot Framework community. I want to reflect to you a description, a portrait, if you will, of who we are as a community and what we strive to be. We are a large community. We have over 9,500 members on our Slack channel. The main Robot Framework repository on GitHub has over 5,600 stars, a like, if you will. To give you some perspective on that, that is the same number of Cucumber and Gauge stars combined. And we are averaging almost 10,000 downloads a day. We are so large, I can't fit everything onto this slide. And we are growing. We are growing day by day. New members are joining the community, new conversations are being had, and new projects are being added to the ecosystem. We are a global variable. Wait a second, that's not right. Oh yes, we are a global community. We have people reaching out from all over the world, coming and looking for a Robot Framework main website and learning about Robot Framework. That said, we can do more. We can be more diverse. This is an important and necessary goal to work towards. It is important that everybody is representative, everybody is welcomed, and most importantly, everybody has a chance to grow and lead in our community. Why, you ask? Simply put, because we can't be the great community we want to be without being more diverse. And I know we can do it. How do I know this? Because we are a supportive community. Everywhere I go, I hear these words all the time about our community, that we're helpful, we're a kind community, we take the time to listen, and we have fun. All of this adds up to being a supportive community. Let's add in being a diverse community. By adding in diversity, we will truly be the great community that we are. We are a community of contributors. Now this might seem obvious to you, right? We're an open source project. And on top of that, Robot Framework is just that, a framework which needs all these pieces to come together to kind of build it up. I would like to highlight that many of the projects that we have in the ecosystem have come from individuals or businesses solving a problem for themselves and then turning around and sharing that solution with us, the community. It is this is what makes us a community of contributors. Now I want to shift focus here and let's take a look at the Robot Framework ecosystem. We have the core that just got a new release, and then we've got the libraries around it, and surrounding all that is all of these tools and utilities, all of these programs that help the ecosystem, really makes Robot Framework what it is, and makes Robot Framework both easy to use and to create test automation with. So let's look back at the past year. If we look back at the past year, we will see a lot of projects coming out of the community. In terms of libraries, we've got the new browser library. The browser library is for browser automation, and it uses Playwright. This was given to us by a team of 5 people. And in addition to that, they got support from several companies I want to call out. We want to thank RoboCorp, Imbus, and Reactor for supporting this work. We have the request library. The request library has been upgraded and it's got a new maintainer. And then we've had several releases of the Selenium library. There are new projects around the core tooling and script development, which this is an area I must say I think is really, really important, because this is what makes Robot Framework really easy to develop test automation for. We've got the new language server. The language server is a utility that has kind of a universal connection out to editors and provides functionality such as code completion, syntax highlighting, go-to definitions, and debugging. There's an added VS Code and PyCharm plugin for this new language server. And I want to thank Fabio and RoboCorp for providing support in the core development on this tool. Then we have Tidy. Tidy is a tool for formatting Robot Framework code according to agreed upon coding standards. And we have RoboCop, a similar tool that's for static code analysis. Many of these will be talked about at this year's Robot Framework Conference. In addition, around the core utilities, we have a new Python LibCore. This is a tool for, actually upgraded Python LibCore. This is a tool for helping you create those libraries for Robot Framework. We've got the new assertion engine. This came out of the browser library work. And the assertion engine is a method for creating meaningful and easy to use assertions for your Robot Framework libraries. We have the second generation of the Robot Framework Hub, a documentation tool. And for Ride and Jenkins, there have been improvements and added support for the new Robot Framework version 4.0. Many of these tools come and you can find out on Market Square. Market Square is a community GitHub organization where we, the community, come together and share our projects. And I encourage you to come and check it out. You can find it at github.com Market Square. Now we've got several goals here for Market Square. Our goals are to provide a visible and central organization for community repositories, to work to build teams around projects and to join forces, and finally to provide long-term maintenance for projects. So if you've got a project that you're interested in either bringing out to Market Square or would like to see out in Market Square, reach out to us. Finally, Pekka reached out to the community to see what other projects have been worked on in this past year. And here's some of the responses. We have Camunda integration, which is working with business process automation and RPA. We have the Robot MK, which is for reporting, and Zeus Robot, which is a Juniper kernel for Robot Framework, and so much more. I want to finish by reaching out to you all and asking for your help. In my talk at the 2018 Robot Framework Conference, I talked about the need for heroes. Heroes are members of the community that step up and take a larger role in the community. Now that larger role, being a leader, might be on a small project and just working with a small team, or it might be across several teams and working with a lot of projects. But it is very important because I'm asking each and every one of you to reflect on how you can help and build up our community. Here's some examples. Now I noted that the browser library was developed had 5 core members, but on top of the 5 core members, the community really came out and supplied all kinds of support for this browser library. And this is a list of the contributors out on the browser library main page. We have a need for a new maintainer for the Selenium library. Tattoo, who's been the maintainer for the past 5 years, is ready to pass on the torch to the next generation of maintainers. And so Tattoo and I are working to find new maintainers for the Selenium library. If you're interested, like I mentioned, come reach out to us. Reach out to us through Market Square. If you go to the Market Square project on Market Square, You can create an issue or reach out to us on the Slack channel. You can reach me at Ed Manlove. Tell me that you want to be a hero and tell me the ways you'd like to contribute to us. So we are a community of individuals, businesses, the foundation. We are core, libraries, ecosystem. We are developers, product, testers. We are the robot framework community. And now it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to RoboCon 2021. Have a great conference and enjoy.
Hey guys, welcome to RoboCon.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Right, I hear you all. Awesome. So we have about 9 questions in. So I thought we'd just jump right to it. First one's for you, Pekka. The question is, so it's now time to refactor our Robo test suite and replace run keyword if with the new if-else structure. Or do you expect big changes in the if-else functionality?
No, I think how it works is pretty much how it's going to work. It would be, at least if you are replacing run keyword if, I think one thing that would be nice would be to have some way perhaps to that if you want to call a keyword as a condition and then you would do the decision that is this branch run based on the keyword result, that would be handy, but that will be some kind of extension for the current one and it won't change the current basically usages, and that's not something that this run keyword if uses supports anyway, so definitely go change. If you plan to do it, definitely take a look at this new tidy tool that I mentioned, because I think it already has that functionality built in. I'm not 100% sure about that. You can check, they have a presentation about this tool here. I think it's already today, so you can check it out, but I think there's a plan to make it so that this new tidy can convert your existing run keyword if structures into this native if else style, which is really, really handy, of course.
Great answer. And Ed, someone wants to know if they wanted to help contribute with the Selenium in Robot Framework, how much coding experience do they need? Is this something they could be trained on, or do they need to be an Uber developer as well?
No, this is...
go ahead, Ed.
Okay.
You go ahead. I answered previous question. I think go ahead.
I wasn't sure. Sorry. So the answer really is no. Some of the most important things that one needs when they're contributing to communities, both kind of an interest and a real desire. That's kind of the first step. There is a base level of Python programming that you need, but as if you reach out to Tattoo and I, who both been maintainers, I was a maintainer for about 5 years before Tattoo. You would say we probably were just enough qualified, and that we actually learned a lot, and learned a lot more on the job than going in previous. So I would say that really the biggest thing is the enthusiasm and the real desire. And then from there, there's actually a large support of community around the core and those libraries. So,
awesome, good to know. Okay, next question. Go ahead, Pekka.
Can I?
Yes,
so everything what Ed said is definitely true. But two more things. Basically, for example, creating a new library can be quite a big task. But creating a new keyword, for example, to an existing library is typically relatively easy. And you don't really need to know that much about programming. And another thing is that you actually don't need to have any programming knowledge to be able to contribute, because, of course, everything basically is contributing. Answering questions on Slack or anywhere else is contributing. Enhancing documentation, writing better tutorials, whatever like that, that's all contributing. So there are many different ways to also do non-coding contributions. So many ways to get started. And if you start with small coding contributions as well, then you can, as Ed just told, you can learn more by doing and then start taking bigger kind of tasks for you.
Awesome. Ismo, I don't know if you had anything to add. If not, next question I'll go to.
Continue, please.
Okay. Next question is another one. Questions from Manny. And Manny said, not really related to Robot Framework 4.0, but I get these questions from my colleagues all the time. What IDE would you recommend to a newbie on Robot Framework? PyCharm, IntelliJ, Visual Studio Core, Red, or Notepad, etc.?
Who wants to go?
I think there's a couple answers there. I mean, one is I usually recommend if you have an editor that you've used in the past or using an editor outside of Robot Framework. So you've come in and you've used, for example, VS Code, then I would say, that's a good place to start there. For people very, very new to the community, there is the Robot Framework IDE or RIDE. But one of the big things that I start to look at now is where we're going with the new language server. So as Pekka mentioned, and I kind of talked briefly about it, we've got a new language server that provides a lot of functionality into the editors. And that's like code completion, syntax highlighting and such. Two particular editors, VS Code and PyCharm, are there. And so those are two that if you're kind of new to editors and you're new to Robot Framework, you could look at RIDE, or I would go look at PyCharm and VS Code for those.
Yeah, I think RIDE and also Red. They are good editors if you are mainly kind of doing Robot Framework editing. But then if you want to also do Python coding, like in my Robot Framework, well, I'm probably writing more Python than Robot Framework syntax. So for me, having a good Python editor is important. And then I happen to like PyCharm, so that's what I've been using. But the PyCharm Robot Framework plugin situation hasn't been too good, but I hope that language server makes that better already in the near future. So it really depends. There's no, I guess there's the reason why we have so many different editors and IDEs. So there's no kind of a thing that would work for everyone. So as Ed said, if there's something that you've already used, you like, just go with that. If not, maybe check out what your colleagues are using, because at least they can help you then.
Nice. Ismo, do you have a favorite editor?
Yes, I'm using VS Code at the moment, but I migrated from PyCharm. So everything what works for you guys. It's a matter of taste in many cases.
Absolutely. I've seen more and more people go to VS Code. So I don't know. I like PyCharm myself, but I guess, like you said, it all depends on what works for you. All right. So next question.
Yeah,
go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, just let's go. I mean, there's no point in discussing too much about editors. There might be better.
Yeah, we have a bunch of questions.
Emacs versus Vim discussion next.
Next question's from Kala, and Kala said, isn't this becoming more close to a fully programming language for developers, if, ors, and fors, than a keyword-driven test automation platform for testers?
Yes and no. I think it's still keyword-driven framework, but I think these control structures then make it possible to use this keyword more efficiently. And I still think that if you are a programmer, at least more complicated logic, you probably want to write in libraries anyway, and that has several benefits. But there are many, many different use cases for these control structures as well. You can definitely overuse them, and you can create horrible test data, but that's true with any feature. But yeah, so I'm not too worried about that, and we probably are going to add more programming features there, but I'm still going to propose people to check out the possibility to write libraries instead, and that's why I have the other talk here in this conference as well.
Great. The next question. Go ahead.
I was just going to add to that. I know, Pekka, you've kind of mentioned in the past that, when you're writing a test in Robot Framework, using those control structures, usually I put those hidden in keywords underneath the top layer. So in a sense, you're kind of getting the best of both worlds here. Is you've got the keyword-driven framework, and so you've got tests that are very readable. And then underneath it, you've got the control structures that you kind of need for dealing with logic. Because whenever you're kind of doing this programming bit, you almost always need that logic type statements So you kind of have the best of both worlds there.
That's certainly true. I don't see basically any good use case to have if-else structure on a test case top level, because that looks very strange that if your test is doing something depending on something. And your test should be more or less like, okay, we do this, we do that, and then we validate the results on the high level. Then when you are doing those individual actions, then of course, more often than not, you need some conditions there, be it then in robot framework syntax or in libraries. But when automating tasks, when using robot framework for RPA, I think then in that case, in the task top level, having something like that, if we have a web system available, do this task via that. If not, then go to REST API, or if not, then do something else. That might be actually useful. And RPA was also the main use case why these if-else structures were now added. We've been talking about them earlier, but I see possible problems with using them too much with tests, but in the RPA world, I think that is much more important, because in those cases, you actually want to see the different conditions and kind of get the good audit trail, what was happening and so on, so that all those decisions are visible. In test automation, most of the time, if is better in a library. But as I said, use cases for that also in testing world.
Great. So next question is, can libdock now be used for several .robot files at once?
No. Most likely that won't ever be added, that kind of functionality. It's kind of should be a separate project. Libdock, I kind of feel that in general, I want to remove as much features from robot framework that are not really related to the core as possible. For example, I'm really happy that this tidies, and we have now this external tidy tool, and we can slowly then deprecate and remove this built-in tidy tool. And with libdock, I think even in the future, maybe we could make robot framework libdock work so that it only produces these machine-readable spec files, and then you can then create different kind of tooling on top of that. But I think that would be really cool to have some tooling like this. And I think we also have presentation-related tools like this. So plans like that, there are no plans to add stuff like this into robot framework core. It's much easier to have external projects that can be then developed independently, released independently from robot framework release schedules and so on.
I can't believe how fast Q&A went. Let's do one last question, because it seems like we didn't really get into much. I'll take the last question that someone submitted was, does Robot allow automatic integration with Appium test execution on Browser Stack or App Center? Does it integrate with cloud-based solutions like that, like Sauce Labs or Browser Stack or anything?
Yeah, well, you can use Robot Framework with all of those. I know it has source integration. It's not in Robot Framework core itself. It's more like those, to some extent, those platforms are using Robot Framework, and then again, Robot Framework is using, for example, via Selenium library, at least it can use Sauce Lab services as well. So that kind of integration is there, can be done, but it's not. Robot Framework core is kind of totally independent from all that kind of thing. So it just has APIs towards the rest of the world.
Okay, guys. Like I said, that was the last question. But before we go, any parting words of wisdom? Ismo, you didn't get much airtime, so any parting words of wisdom you want to leave RoboCon?
Yeah, so there was a question how many participants we have this year, and it's 648.
Nice.
That's amazing, and 40 different countries. So that's amazing. And thank you, everybody.
300 more than it was last year when we had the on-site event, so that's a huge thing.
Huge. Great achievement. Awesome. So like I said, we're also using RoboCon venue. I believe all you will be in there after this as well. We have about 10 other questions that haven't been answered. So definitely check out Pekka, Ismo, and Ed in the RoboCon venue. We have a light side and a dark side. And I believe you all are going to be in the light side on the left. So thank you all for joining us. And thank you for setting up the stage for an awesome event. Appreciate you.
Yeah, so there's a speaker's corner at the main sponsor area. So I think we'll all go after this. I need to log together as well, but so we'll be there.
Sounds good. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.
Kiitos.